So the penultimate round of the Six Nations is over, and now we're looking ahead to Super Saturday next week to decide this year's winners. But before we do that, let's take a look back at this week's fantasy score. Overall, a pretty decent week for me. I made some late changes and I guess they didn't do me any harm, so quite happy with that. Usually when I make late changes, it does come back to bite me. Anyway, let's see how I did for round 4. So with a score of 822, it happens to be my highest game week score yet, so I've got to be happy with it. Let's start off with the first game of the weekend, with Wales and France facing off. I mean, the game was pretty tense, so the flow of the game did diminish early in the second half, which meant that fantasy points were few and far between. The two French centres for me didn't perform brilliantly, with an average of 29 points each. Dupont did do pretty well, with 40 points, so I wasn't really too worried about his score. And Aldry was actually coming back from a cold, so we heard the commentators. But obviously we didn't hear that before the game. This meant that he was actually taken off late in the game, whereas he usually stays and battles it out to the final whistle. But again, 39 points isn't too bad. Then my only two Welsh players definitely could have been better. But I wasn't expecting too much off Rowlands. But Adams on the bench did let me down slightly, especially because I could have picked Lowe instead for Ireland, who had an unbelievable game, and in fantasy points he skyrocketed. Where I really got the majority of my points was of course the Italy vs Scotland game. Now surprisingly to me, the Italy players, or some of them, actually scored decent points this week, with the likes of Ioane, Halafihi and Capuzzo for his debut. Obviously I didn't go with any Italians, but I did go all in on the Scottish. And for once in this tournament, my captain paid off with a huge points. Hogg was the shining light in my team and managed to rack up over 230 points. Graham was also great, having scored a try. Steyn was okay, and Sam Johnson actually probably stole a clear-cut Steyn try, so I was pretty fuming with that. As for Turner, he was quite average to be honest, definitely could have scored more points for me with a try or two. I missed out big time with the centre picks here with Johnston and Harris. But we do live and learn, and I can't be too mad at it. And for the final game of the weekend, it was a real hard one to take because I went all in on 4 English players and only 2 Irish in my starting team, so that was less than ideal. I guess all English players were just a write-off really, because they played the whole game with 14 men. I guess Simmons didn't do too badly with 32 points, but nonetheless not great from England, and I'll definitely keep that in mind next week. Saying that, the decision to change my super sub to Conan did probably work when he came on and scored a try. I did think I had messed it up when Dombrandt came on so early in the game for the injured Curry, but thankfully Conan stepped up and I made it worthwhile. Of course I picked the wrong Irish winger on the bench. Conway was a lot cheaper than Lowe, so I would have had to save elsewhere, but definitely should have put in 4 Irish instead of 4 English. So that's the end of the wrap up for round 4. For the final game week of the Six Nations, I'm actually planning to do 2 team selection videos, as requested by some of you down in the comments. One will be a super risky team, for those of you who need to do some catching up in your leagues, and then one will be a normal, more conservative, which will be probably more like usual, so a little safer. So let me know how you guys did this week, and also let me know if you're excited about the last round of the Six Nations, or probably more likely sad. But remember, the Women's Six Nations is on straight after, and they also have a fantasy game. So subscribe to the channel to keep up to date. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.